Good morning, Sean here, Mountains Garage. It's actually high noon, Saturday. It is 68 degrees and beautiful blue skies and sunny with no humidity, no bugs. It is an absolutely great time to be alive here in the state of Maine. And we got a whole stretch of weather coming up like this. I can't believe the last week of July and looks like the first week of August here in 2021 are this fantastic. Some people like it hotter, some people like it cooler. Me, I'm happy anywhere in the high 60s, low 70s with no humidity. It is awesome. But you didn't come here for a weather report, did you? I say that every time. We're going to have some bonus content this week, as a lot of people really interested in learning more about the 4L80E transmission. Fortunately, I have done quite a few, I'm not sure of the number, Turbo 400 videos. They're all in my playlist, wherever that may be, on my channel page, Mountains Garage. And I'm going to continue with the Turbo 400, breaking it down into very minute detail. With the 4L80, now that I'm a year and a half into my channel, I'm going to start in the basement. We're actually going to talk about what makes it different, differences in the years that they made them, and what makes them great. So let's follow along, shall we? Let's start with the visual differences. From 1991 to 1999, they all have the same Chevrolet bell housing that they've always used. In 2000, they added the top bolt hole, obviously not on this one. This transmission we're looking at is a 1996. They added the extra bolt that the LS style engine takes. You can obviously run this on an LS engine. You're not going to be able to use the top bolt. It is no different than when you put a legacy TH350, Turbo 400, whatever, behind an LS engine. You just don't use the top bolt. Many people do it. Doesn't really seem to be a big deal. While we're in the bell housing area, you'll notice an O-ring on the input shaft. The two things the 4L80E has that a Turbo 400 doesn't is a .75 overdrive and a lockup torque converter. Do not adjust your set. Yes, I know this transmission is upside down. I'm actually preparing to put the valve body in it, and I don't want to dump my check balls out. So I'm showing you this transmission on the fixture upside down. From 1991 to 1996, the cooler lines are located in a traditional location at the front of the transmission, right next to each other. In this case, I've removed the factory Jiffy Tight style quick connects with the little clip, and I've put in two fittings from a Turbo 400. They're straight thread. They thread right in, and I'm converting to 5/16 tube, the traditional cool line that Chevrolet used for decades, to run up to the radiator. This is going in a guy's Camaro, and I'm just trying to make it easy for him. You can also put in -6 lines. These fittings are both the same length. They're short, identical to a Turbo 400. In 1997, they left one cooler line here, and they put the other one in the back of the transmission. The one in the back is about 2.5 inches long. So you need a short one and a long one. You can get those in the Jiffy Tight style. You can get them in -6. I haven't researched up until, I haven't even thought of it until I started talking during this part of the video. I've never seen a long 5/16 tube style to fit the rear of a 4L80E. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. Probably doesn't. With the rear cooler line location, floor clearance on some vehicles becomes a problem. In my LS swapped 84 Dodge D150, I had to hammer the floor in a little bit. I'm running -6 lines, and I made a tight as corner as I possibly could. I still had to bash the floor in a little bit to clear it. It's never hit the floor, but it's tight. And that's in a truck. So in a car, having the spread cooler lines might be a problem. That would be 1997 and up. Out here in the storage box, here's an example of the spread cooler lines. And these are the Jiffy Tight style fittings that push in with the clip. They're excellent. They were made for ease on the assembly line, not necessarily easy for you to work on. And here's the extra bolt hole on the top of the V on the 2000 and up 4L80E. In the first couple years of production, 91, 92, 93-ish, they had a really bad case connector, known for leaking oil. You always want to check for oil in the connector. I'm trying to give you a good look of it here. These internal harnesses, there are some differences. There's basically two major ones. They're only about $35 if you have any problems with them. From the direct drum on down internally, they're very much like a Turbo 400. There are some differences, and the parts don't necessarily interchange. We know the direct drum does. I know some of the center supports do. Everything else looks very familiar. It looks very much like the Turbo 400, like the rear servo. All the same pieces, slightly different, I assume. The parking pole guide. I mean, everything here looks very familiar if you're used to doing Turbo 400s. Some people ask, which ones are better? The pre-1997 version or the 97 and up with the different lubrication and some other parts? They made rolling changes over the years that do affect your assembly and interchange of parts. If you have the two forward cool line position, you actually have a larger overdrive roller clutch. It was hit or miss whether you had a 16 or a 34 element sprag on the back of the direct drum. Obviously you can upgrade. That's why if you're shopping for a 4L80E drum, I always say 97 and up, because it's guaranteed to have the 34 element on the back of it. If you are interchanging parts throughout the years, be sure to consult the old Bible. Whatever information you can find, it's very important to check, make sure things are compatible, and they do an excellent job explaining it, not only in the book. Often, more information becomes available after the manuals are printed. I have 3 or 4 pages of information that came with my gasket set. This is from Transtech. It explains that they only include the early gaskets now, regardless of the year of the overhaul kit, because the early gasket fits all the 4L80Es. The late gasket only fits 1997 and up. Excellent information. They even go on to explain which separator plates and valve bodies and cases are compatible. Lots of good information if you're interchanging parts. A very big difference between a Turbo 400 and a 4L80E is the 4L80E is electronically controlled, and that scares people. However, when you break it down, it's really not that scary. In all the manuals, they will tell you the resistance of your electronic pieces. Let's go over what you have. You have 2 shift solenoids, and they're different. The connectors are different. You can't mess them up. You have the torque converter pulse width modulated valve. Now in tuning, you can make this an on and off switch. It's pulse width modulated so people don't feel the torque converter lock up and unlock. I hate that. I just want to feel it like a regular shift. This is your pressure control force motor. And I can tell you from experience that while, for instance, I took this apart and drilled the valve body and did some modifications to it, you can do it all with programming if you want to, or most of it. The transmission in the LS Swap Dodge, we got it set above maybe 3rd throttle. Very violent. It'll chirp the tires when it shifts. And that transmission has never been taken apart. This is called the pillow switch. And each one of the gold switches receives pressure. It bolts right here on top of the valve body, or actually underneath it technically. And when oil is applied here, it makes continuity between those 2 metal tabs, which makes it really easy to check. If you take your ohm meter, set on ohms, put it on the tabs and push in the middle, and you show continuity on your gauge in all 5, then the pillow switch is good. The manual tells you what each one does, but this tells the computer what gear the transmission is in, and it's vital information that it needs. So, that's how you test it. Just put your ohm meter on either side, push on the center. Do it 5 times, you've checked it. The valve body itself. Looking at it from this position, or starting with the shift solenoids, this is really easy. 20 ohms resistance, 20 ohms, 10, 5. So if you get out your ohm meter and you get 20, 20, 10, and 5, and that's the minimum reading, if you don't get those readings, then go ahead and look in the manual and retest it. But all the ones I check, I just go right at it with the ohm meter. They're all 2-terminal. You can't mess this up. You just take your ohm meter and probe both sides. 20, 20, 10, 5. If that's what you get, electronically, it is sound. On the side of the 4L80E case, there's a speed sensor in the front. And if it's 2-wheel drive, there's a speed sensor in the back. If it's 4-wheel drive, there's a plug here. And they take the rear reading off the transfer case. A lot of times there won't be a tone ring inside the transmission. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. So if you want to convert a 4-wheel drive to a 2-wheel drive and you're going to need the rear speed sensor working, you got to make sure there's a tone ring when you look in this hole. So remove the plug and look in. You'll see it. For this transmission, I had to buy 2 new speed sensors. And I can tell you right out of the box, if you ohms test them, they're about 1400 ohms. If you look online, there's lots of ways to test a speed sensor. You can run metal past the magnet on AC voltage, but I can tell you new out of the box, just ohming it, it's 1400, give or take, for both of them. So easy to change. They're external. So 2 speed sensors, which are the same, input and output. A pillow switch, 2 shift solenoids, A and B, or 1 and 2, depending on how you read the book. A PWM solenoid for the torque converter, and a force motor to control pressure. Those 7 items combined with your PCM run your transmission, and you can manipulate the tuning to make it do what you want. I'm not going to say it's a foolproof system, but it works really well. You can also, if you go online and Google it, you can hook up switches and you can run this manually. They make manual control boxes too if you don't want to run a PCM or if you have a carburetor. So it's possible to have a 4L80E in your vehicle. And I believe the boxes that you buy do something to control the line pressure instead of having it wide open all the time. So look into it if a manual control 4L80E is something you want. You can also buy a manual valve body for it. So check it out if that's your desire. But in this case, it's going to be run by the PCM on an LS swap. Also a neat feature of a 4L80E is a temperature probe in the harness, which gives the fluid temperature to the PCM. This is a factory shift cable bracket from a truck. It bolts near the case connector to these 2 case lugs, and the bolts, the heads are near the floorboard and the threads are headed down. Not a big deal, but they gave you a Torx headed bolt. So I worked on a fleet of these. When they were new, I would take my Torx socket, remove these, and put in a regular M8 125 bolt. Most people didn't do that. And this is a result. Most of the time to get them out now, I got to weld nuts on them. That's the old Torx bolt, and I just welded a nut on it, traditional method. And this gets them out of the case. But it's a hassle because, 20 or so years of rusting, that Torx head is junk. It also made it very difficult to service in the car. A lot of people will just bend this out of the way because this folds right down around the pan rail. So, something to look for. And it's not impossible to conquer. And where this transmission's headed, we don't even need these holes, but that's what I had to do to get them out. Another potential problem area is instead of, like on a Turbo 400 with a nail that held the linkage in, went front to back. If you had the pump out, you could slide the nail out. If you didn't have the pump out, you had to bend the nail to get it out. Well, they thought to improve that in the 4L80, and they made a serrated nail. It's got fins on it, and it drives into the case, and the valve body separator plate goes over it so it can't fall out if the serration's failed. But many times you go to get it out and the head pops right off. That's the head. So if you're careful, and you can see I welded a knob on the end of it, and it allowed me to pry it out of there. And in this case, I have more nails coming, but this works perfect now. So I drove it right back in. It works as intended. And that stupid serrated nail is the cheapest I found, was just under $10. So on the side of the case, this is a rare case. 96 and 7 had the longer shaft. Before that, 91 to 95, they had the short Turbo 400 shaft. They interchange. This will also fit a Turbo 400, but it'll leave the shaft sticking way out of the case for no reason. These outer bolts here and here are for a massive, and they had two different styles, a 2-plug and a 1-plug neutral safety switch. Bolts on the side, and it slides over the shaft, and the shaft operates the switch. So if you want to retrofit a Turbo 400, you could put the longer shaft in and make mounting bolts for your pernurndle, they call them, your neutral safety switch. And you could make it work if you wanted to, but on a 4L80E, 97 and up, they all have the long shaft. This again, 95 and 96, some did, some didn't. Had provisions for it. This one does. So this is kind of an odd case, but it'll work good for its intended purpose. When you're servicing a 4L80E, getting the filter seal out of the case can be difficult, and you can damage the aluminum. I've fought with it my entire career. Again, I worked on a fleet of them. If you were changing them all the time, you could usually pop them right out of there, but it's usually not any fun, and you try not to do any damage. A subscriber to my channel, who's now become a friend, I've mentioned him before, his name is John out of Missouri. He sent me this. It's a pipe nipple with a nut welded on it, and again, this man is a genius. It threads in perfectly and allows you to pop that seal right out without hurting a thing. It works every time. He should patent these. Awesome. The two most popular filters you're going to find look nearly identical. However, one has a bump to sit on the bottom of a deeper pan, and my 1996, I don't have room for that. My pan is slightly shallower, so I need that one. But something to look out for. If you buy a filter, you need to know which pan you have, or buy both filters and figure it out when you get home. Almost every 4L80 you will find with a magnet in the pan. Remember to put it back in. It prevents all that metal junk from floating around, getting stuck on your speed sensors, which are magnets, as well as not getting clogged up in your valve body. Overhaul gasket sets and rebuild kits are typically early 91 to 96, and then 97 to 2011. After 97, they went to a molded piston in the direct and forward clutch drums, among other things. The front overdrive clutches have a pin on the steels. There's other differences, so you need to know the year of transmission you're working on. For the pan gasket, you can have traditional cork, you can have paper, you pronounce it as you want. People make fun of my accent if I say Farpak. Fairpack, Farpak. Those are popular, but the majority of 4L80Es came with a beautiful reusable gasket that pretty much lasts the life of 3 transmissions. So a lot of people discard that immediately. A lot of your high-end filter kits come with that. That's why I have a collection of them. Again, we worked on a fleet, and I'd find them in the trash can. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with them. The one I'm using on today's transmission, I cleaned it up. Typically, you'll get rust and debris from this center seal out a little bit. You can over-tighten it. It's just a great gasket. So it allows you to service it by just gunning the bolts tight, and as long as you don't break them off, you can't over-tighten it. They tried to make it foolproof. So I'm glad I stopped the assembly process to do this introductory video to the 4L80E. In the future, we will do more. Step by step, just like the Turbo 400. This transmission, they asked for a mild street transmission. So a few minor mods that cost nothing. I didn't buy a shift kit, much like we just did the Turbo 400 a few weeks ago. You can duplicate pretty much anything you can buy with a few drill bits and a little bit of time. I dual fed the direct drum. The steps are the same as the Turbo 400. You leave the second seal back on the center support off, the center seal out of the direct drum, and you plug the hole to the right hand side of the center support bolt from this perspective. The 3 steps, Turbo 400, 480E, they're the same. I took the valve body apart, which looks intimidating, but it's not. It's really simple and really modular. I drilled the separator plate for the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th shifts. All this information's online everywhere. If you were to buy a shift kit, there's options to block the accumulators. They make a plate. You just unbolt the towers that you see holding the valve body up. If you can see it from I can't tell on the camera whether you can see it or not, but there's lots more things you can do. However, I know how violent these can be with no modifications other than tuning. So in this case, I just modified a few things. And with a 480E, that's really all you need to do to take quite a bit of power, even in a heavy vehicle. This is going in a Camaro, half the weight of a Suburban. So I think it'll hold up just fine. So in the future, we'll do more, I promise. Like, share, subscribe. Enjoy this beautiful day. I'll catch you next time.